Hello, good afternoon. My name is Marcus, and basically just going to share with you how I put a brisket together. I'm not a professional. I'm just the guy next door who loves to put together some good food, and I've been working at this for a few years, and now I feel like I'm at a point where I can share with you guys what I do to put together something that's worthwhile. All right, so the first thing is, I've got an offset smoker pit, and it's pretty heavy duty. It's pretty heavy, so it's not something I move around the backyard at all. Actually, it hasn't moved since I put it here. I don't know what you're working with, but definitely have a pretty large fire pit here, and got enough room for probably about maybe four good-sized briskets if we really wanted to max it out here. So. Anyways, first thing we want to do is start off with a nice clean area to work with. So I've already kind of sprayed it down, washed it down, rinsed it, and so we don't have any extra particles or anything like that. And I mean, of course, you can't get everything out, but as long as you're not dealing with anything foul from the cooking time before, it's always the best way to start your pit. All right, so here we go. All right, so now we're back in the kitchen, getting started for the brisket, and as you can see, we got a brisket right here, ready to go, and still in the bag, of course. Haven't pulled it and prepared. I'm going to share with you what I do. But the first thing is obviously picking a brisket, and the first thing, here's what I get, and I think what you like to see is what's on sale. And so clearly getting what's on sale is most challenging. You got three types of cuts or three types of options when you're buying brisket. You have your select, you have your choice, and then you have your prime. You can spend hours looking on the internet trying to decide how to best find a brisket. But bottom line is, let's get something to cook. I mean, if you're just starting out, you're really just going to want to burn through probably a handful of briskets before you really decide that you're in the business to spend more money on brisket. So I encourage you to buy what's on sale, but to kind of really get to a decent cut, start off with choice. And if you can afford the prime, well, there you go. Just hit up Costco and get yourself a prime brisket. You're never going to go wrong there. But if you're looking to kind of save a little bit of money, if you're cooking briskets more often, choice, getting them on sale, $1.79 to $1.99 is a good price. When you see it, stock up, put them in a deep freezer, and you'll have them ready to go. So that's kind of how it works. All right, here's what we're working with. Just right out of the bag. I did something here that I did not record, which was actually wash the brisket. And really it's more of a rinse. There's really not much to do with it. One of the things I definitely recommend is cleaning the sinks and your tabletop areas way before you start this project. Whatever might have traveled with this piece of meat before it should have not reached your kitchen, but if it did, that's where we want to kind of make sure that nothing else jumps on this piece of meat. Okay, so definitely pulled it out of the bag and rinsed it. Just rinse it with water. Now another thing that was done before this brisket was prepared is I let it sit out. So I pulled it out of the fridge. It was completely thawed. This is something you cannot rush. You want the meat to be nice and almost, in my opinion, again, this is nothing scientific. I'm not a professional, but having the meat closer to room temperature is really what you want to do. You don't want to start working with it ice cold, and you definitely don't want it frozen, but having something that's completely thawed and even almost room temperature, definitely cool. So I've let this thing sit out for about 30 minutes after I pulled it out of the fridge for it to kind of set, so that now it's been rinsed, and I'm letting it kind of dry up a bit, and I'm now going to start to trim out the fat. And again, trimming the fat is just really how much of fat do you want on this thing while you cook. You definitely want to leave some fat, but you certainly want to carve out a little bit, otherwise there's just way too much oils when you're done. So I definitely want to kind of trim this part out here, and as you can see on the bottom there's a lot on here. I'm going to flip it over here and show you the reverse side of this brisket, and but we're going to trim out a little bit on the bottom side. So here's the bottom side. As you can see, a lot more fat. Definitely want to trim out a lot of this area here. I'm not going to record me cutting or trimming this brisket. I'll show you when I'm done. But as you can see, there's just a really big layer there of fat we just kind of get rid of, okay? Because the main reason why we want to do this is that we're going to season this brisket and put a lot of spices on top, salt and pepper, and we don't want to necessarily season just the fat. And so when it cooks, it's going to be some really good tasting fat, but it doesn't actually penetrate the meat. So we definitely want to pull some of this off. Lastly, of course, we want to always keep cleaning our hands in between. I wash my hands, I can't tell you how many times in this process of preparing and putting the meat on the grill. But you can never, but basically the one philosophy that I share with my kids and anybody else that I'm doing, and again, I'm not a professional, I'm not a cook, I'm not anything, but when I am in the kitchen, it's ABC. Always be cleaning, always clean up. After every stage, after every move, clean up. That way you're always working with the best space. All right, we're back outside. We're about to light the fire. A few tips on the fire. I use charcoal and wood, not just wood or not just charcoal. I've been frustrated plenty of times with the lighting and the keeping lit of fires, and just the consistency that I've just found that, the mix of the two just gives me the best overall result. So the first thing I do is I use one of these here. I've got one of these charcoal starters, and so basically, fill it up here with some charcoal, put some lighter fluid on it. Of course, there are different ways to light it. You can use paper and all that. I really just, like I said, I'm just ready to get to the cooking. So you can do whatever you want. I'm just trying to get a fire. So here we go. There we go. So now we're lit, and let this baby fire up for the next 5 or 10 minutes. You'll notice your charcoal is going to start to burn and turn white. Really, it's not until you get to about that white powder look where the charcoals are ready to spread out and be the flame for, or I guess to be the base for the wood. Okay. All right, back in the kitchen, and I've laid out a brisket. Here's just best tips from me of doing this enough times, making a big mess. I usually just put like some kind of a towel that's underneath the cutting board. You're going to probably need a pretty large cutting board. I finally have one, or actually I've had one for a long time, and that's what I use it for. And as you can see, I trimmed out a significant amount of fat, and although I can't tell you how much fat to trim exactly, like I said, I'm not a professional. I just want to get to cooking something. As you can see, if you don't have a significant amount of fat to throw away, you're probably not cutting enough. But you definitely don't want to overcook or overcut, because you do want to have some fat and that kind of melts and creates some flavor in the brisket when it's smoking. Okay. All right, it's time to prepare the spices. Here's what we work with. Again, I'm not a pro. I've been mixing and matching. You can waste a lot of time trying to invent the new wheel for brisket, but you know what? Bottom line, it comes down to this. I got this nice fresh pepper from Costco. There, you can get some salt and fresh salt. Mainly, I get the whole peppercorns, put them in a grinder, grind them up, make them nice and fine, and then really do about a half and half here, and then I top off a little bit of here and a little bit of this. So you kind of get a little bit of this, but the majority of the spice is going to be a salt and pepper mix, which is really where we start. So here we go. Here is our mix. Again, all these pieces ground up together, and I'm going to sprinkle over here. Oh, and by the way, in the process, I actually did accidentally almost sliced my finger off. Little humor there, but definitely not fun. Okay, so you can see here we've done side one, and again, nice and even. Kind of pat it down, and again, the reason why I use a towel and on this large table, which was really the dinner table here, converted over to a clean space, is just so I can rotate and spin the board very easily. And then, of course, when I'm done, I can, for the most part, just pick up the towel and dispose of all the run outside and dump off all the peppers and spices, and then put this thing in the wash. Okay, so here's the bottom side, and as you can see, it's pretty much done. We're just going to let it sit for a few minutes. I'm going to go check on the fire here, but overall, what you're wanting to
to look at is, do I have enough spice or not? And really what's going to be about is how do you want your bark to taste, after it's been sitting on the pit for a long time. Ultimately, what starts to crisp up and starts to kind of burn is the spices on the end. So that's going to be the pepper. So the barkier, your brisket is, the more pepper and kind of spice you want, and ultimately that's going to have your taste and everything else you're looking to do. So again, trial and error. You'll finally figure out what you're looking for, what taste you're looking for. But ultimately, hey, you just want to cook something everybody can enjoy and eat. So again, that's where we start here. Mostly a 50-50 mix. Top it off with a little bit of these two on top to kind of spice it up. But other than that, don't get carried away with these things because you've already got a lot of salt. So you kind of want to be sure that the pepper is really the force, the force behind the flavor as well as the bark. So anyways, time to check on the fire. All right, we're back outside. So as you can see here, let the fire been sitting here for about 10-15 minutes. And as you can see, you're starting to get the color gray ashes on the charcoals. That means we're ready to go. And again, I can feel the nice consistent heat coming from the coals as well. You don't want to wait too long because that's part of what is going to cook your fire. So cook your meat. So it's time to go ahead and move it on. So here we go. Okay, so you can see I just dumped all the coals here into the pit, and again, don't judge me here. I know some people would say, "Oh, I can't believe he's dumping coals in his barrel." It's mainly because it's very hard to slide these coals into my firebox the way it is. So again, do what works. I'm going to basically use a shovel that I use all the time to kind of push the coals all the way through, and essentially be at the very most corner of this the firebox. So then I'll start to apply wood there. So anyways, like I said, I'm not going to leave the coals here, but it's just the step that I use. I just wanted to show you the color of the charcoal so you know what you're working with, and that's kind of when you know your fire is ready to go. All right, next thing, I have my wood stack here. Again, you want to use wood that's pretty much dried out, or at least had the chance to absorb water and then release water and kind of go back and forth for a while, so that you know what you're working with is dry enough to actually cook. You don't want anything too green to cook with, otherwise your food's going to smell like you weren't using very dry wood. It's just not going to come out right. Plus your fire might not get as hot. So this has been sitting out here for a while, and I refill it every once in a while, get new wood. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Here's what the fire looks like on the inside. So we've got a fire flame going on. That's charcoal. And we're going to go ahead and add these pieces of wood here. And really, what you'll find is that you don't have to add a whole lot of wood. The charcoal is very consistent. I use the Kingsford professional grade briquettes and charcoal. And the reason why? Well, because I've lost enough fires over time to just get frustrated enough to where I'm just tired of doing it. I'm tired of relighting fires, and actually this charcoal seems to be holding its own time and time again. Plus I love going to Costco, so it's a great price there typically. And then I go ahead and combine it with, again, this is about $20 worth of wood. I'm only going to use a few, so this wood can actually last a while. So at the end of the day, this is what we're doing. So right now we have no meat on the pit, and we have a nice smoke. We want to let this thing get hot. Do have a temperature here, and again, my temperature gauge is irrelevant to you because it doesn't really matter what my temperature gauge says. You're going to have to learn your pit and know how hot you need it to be in order to cook your food. Right here, as you can see, this is a really heavy white gray smoke. I want it to get a lot clearer before I start putting any meat in there, and of course I want the pit to start to stabilize in temperature. Okay, so we're probably waiting another 5-10 minutes here. We're back here, and let's check our fire. So you can see that fire is nice and consistent, nice and strong. It's burning. Not a whole lot of smoke coming out the side anymore. That just kind of burned off all the sediments and all the unhealthy stuff. Really, you want to kind of get it through that phase. And then up here, you noticed we got more of a white smoke and starting to get a little more clear. And that's kind of what you want. Want some more of a clearish whiter smoke. Looks cleaner. And then of course when you start putting your hand on it, you can start to see, hey, Wow, I can feel the heat, and that's what you want to know. You don't want a cold smoke. You want a nice, warm, hot smoke, and that's when you kind of know you're getting to that ready point. So I'm going to go ahead and get that brisket put on now, and we're going to start there. So as you can see, the temperature gauge is also spiked up a lot higher since we started, but again, pay no mind to my temperature gauge because it's not going to matter for you. I can tell you what, I've cooked all the way up to this range right here of 350, and of course every smoker would tell you that's way too hot for any brisket to cook at that level, because that's clearly past the smoking point. But again, my pit, it's such a big pit that if it may sound like 350, but it's probably a good chance this thermometer's broken, so it doesn't matter. I just know what's the sweet spots, and again, with a pit like that, you got to know where to place your briskets, and what that heat should look like. All I know is that when I start to get down to that 150, 200 mark, it's way too cold, and it's definitely not cooking the brisket. And I've been there, done that, tried to keep it in that blue range, and then the whole time I was just literally not cooking the brisket. So sometimes your thermometers will deceive you just because of the pit you're working with. So anyways, just lessons learned the hard way. Okay, now we got the brisket on the pit. Again, I'm going to share with you what I do. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. I'm just trying to get a good piece of meat at the end of the day that tastes good, that I can feed to my family. But I cook it with the heavier fat side down, okay? And again, we've done a lot of trimming, so again, the part that had the most fat, I put that down. And I also put the heavy side, or the bigger side, on the part closest to the flame. And I guess my logic there is that this is probably going to be the hotter side of the pit, so I want the fat to kind of melt off as much as possible. It's probably going to be a little harder to burn. Plus, this is the part that's the thinnest part of the meat, so I want that to cook a little more evenly and not so quick. Or at least, I don't want it to burn. So, because that's kind of going to be your best portions right there. Starting from left to right, these are going to be your most exciting pieces of brisket when it's all said and done. And this part is going to be the part you chop up and make some chopped beef sandwiches or whatever, the parts that don't have to look as pretty. So anyways, at the end of the day, it should all taste great. But here's where we are. I'm about to close the pit and let this thing smoke for about the next 3 hours, at which point we'll wrap it with some aluminum foil. All right, so say goodbye. Alright, so we're a couple hours in here on this brisket, and so you may not see much change, but from my point of view, you kind of see the meat kind of hardening up and it's kind of tightening up. It's not so, it's definitely cooking. It's getting different heat. Eventually we're going to start to hit a stall point on this particular brisket, and of course I'm opening up here, and any pit master will probably say, don't open the pit, that kind of thing. But again, I'm just trying to show you guys a few things. I'm not going to leave it open here. But essentially what I'm about to do here is take the brisket and actually wrap it into an aluminum foil. And at that point, that's where the heat will basically be retained and allowed to increase past the stall point so that the meat can continue to have an internal temperature that's rising. So for all the other critics out there, you're like, oh, where's this temperature gauge? You know what? I've been doing this a while, so I don't actually use one. And plus, I'll show you a finishing off technique that I use that really kind of keeps us all safe and makes sure everything's done. But anyways, for now, this is where we are. And also, just another pointer on the fire is you certainly want to double check on your flame. Make sure you've got a nice heat source. And as you noticed right here in the opening, I've just kind of left it open. Basically when I first got this pit, I would open and close, and a lot of pits have these little mechanisms that are kind of cool, and you can adjust it and increase air and reduce airflow. But at the end of the day, you know what I find is just leaving it open gives you the optimal control or flow of air into the pit, and very rarely are you even having to close it, because I guess the way this particular design on this pit is that maybe it's just as bad design. But I have not found, matter of fact, I found less control over the temperature by actually having it closed. So that's what we're looking at. Okay, as you can see, we're taking a break. I took the brisket out off the pit, and as you can see, I use these big forks here to actually pull it off and on and move it around at this stage. The brisket's not falling apart yet. It's still got some weight, and as well as it's holding together. It's not falling apart. Okay, here we go. So basically what I did to fold it is I just brought up the ends, and again, if I had two hands and the ability to do all that, I would have done it. But I basically pulled the two ends like a triangle, like a tent, and grabbed the tops, twist them on the top. So essentially, I'm creating a little bit of space inside of here that allows the air, the heat to kind of stay. We're really not packing it like a sheet, we're not doing that, but basically that's kind of what we're doing. And if you're curious to see what kind of foil that I use, again, another Costco product, and this is not a Costco commercial, but this we're running about 23 bucks or so. But you get really good foil, nice heavy duty, doesn't fall apart, doesn't break, and that's exactly what the kind of foil you need to work with brisket. And plus you'll save a lot of money, because you could easily go blow $9-10 bucks on not even close to the amount of foil that you need for this purpose. All right, here we go again. So again, wrapped it up. Everything's nice and tight. Again, got a little space at the top. Allows that heat to kind of, stay inside the foil, and that's it. We're closing it up, and we're just going to leave this bad boy in there for about the next 6 to 10 hours. Okay, so. And that's about it. Now we're just going to crank up the heat and let it do its job, and we'll leave it alone. At this point, again, when you do a good job with the foil, it's really hard to burn it. And if you're using, again, a nice moisture, you got wood and everything, so you really shouldn't dry out the meat. And if you're keeping your temperature low, you shouldn't really burn it up either. So that's where we are. All right, here we go. So we're about somewhere between 12 and 13 hours worth of smoking, and also oven cooking here. So I'll explain a lot more of that later, but basically just to make sure we get the right temperatures. And but overall, we're looking pretty done here. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to cut it or anything. It looks like I'm going to, you could tell the bark is hard. And it just looks and feels and smells like a brisket. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put some barbecue sauce on it and let it hold. I'm going to put it in for probably another 30-45 minutes to let the sauce bake in, and then that's it. We're going to let it rest. Okay, here we go. Just nothing pretty about it. Just put a bunch of barbecue sauce on the top and the bottom, flipped it over, and the sauce I use, you definitely want to choose a good sauce. I use Sweet Baby Ray's. The reason is because if you're going to spend a lot of time on a meat like this, you want to have a sauce that you trust. Some sauce can become bitter when you put it in heat. So if you're not sure about your sauce, just leave it as is, and then apply the sauce when you decide to eat your brisket, not into the heat, so that way you don't take away from the actual flavor of the brisket from the pit and the spices that you've already used. So again, if you're not sure, put the sauce in later or when you do eat it. But if you really understand your sauce and you like it, again, the idea is not to cook the sauce. You just want it to kind of set in at the last stage, somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes on the as the brisket's kind of taking shape. Okay, here we go. So we got the finished product here. As you can see, left it in there about 45 minutes, an hour or so. And you don't want to overdo it, because again, you can cause the barbecue sauce to get a little bitter. But we're done. We're going to let this set. So again, you want to let this thing set. The internal temperature of the brisket is going to be very hot. So this is not the time to start cutting it up. You want to let it sit and rest. And the longer the better, to be quite honest with you, the better your brisket's going to be. You really want it to just be completely set and almost cold, in my opinion, for you to have the best cutting experience and to also be able to manage it. So, okay, so here you go. I did a little cutting here. Now, this is not exactly where I'm going to finish cutting the brisket, but I wanted to give you a peek inside what we're looking at as far as colors are concerned. As you can see, there's a nice line of bark there. And if I had smoked it just a little bit longer on the pit, a little bit differently, I actually pulled it off the pit a little sooner than I usually do, and wrapped it sooner because we had some obligations to be at. So we didn't get the smoke ring on this one the way I usually see the smoke ring. So you'll see a nice good smoke ring here if you leave it on the smoker before wrapping for that first 3 to 4 hours. So also, what I didn't mention earlier in the video was that when I'm picking a brisket, I typically pick a brisket that's 14 to 16 pounds. I try to stay within that. You go any bigger, you're going to probably have some temperature issues. If you don't have a lot of thermometers, that could present a problem. And especially as you're learning, you want to keep, a 14 to 16 pound brisket is definitely a great place to learn. Anything smaller than that, your temperature, your fire can be too hot and cause some burning or over crisping. So anyway, like I said, that's what I like to stick to: 14 to 16 pounds, get the best results there. And again, it's an opportunity to keep learning. You got to just keep as many variables the same as possible over quite a number of attempts, so that way you can get your best opportunities to to feed your family something worthwhile. Okay, time to cut the brisket, and of course, I've kind of, for our viewing pleasure, I have shared some brisket just to give out some samplers, and my wife has already said it's the best, so best one yet. So it's always a good sign when your spouse and kids love to snack on the samplers. But I also wanted to illustrate, when you're cutting the brisket, how are we supposed to cut? So as you can see, there's a big piece right here. There are different parts of the brisket. The most obvious is this piece here, which just basically falls apart because the fat separates it. And if you smoked it right, it should really be just almost falling off. So you can see that part. That's going to be another part we're going to cut separately. But the main thing, and again, you'll get good at cutting briskets. It's one of the most confusing tasks, but once you kind of figure out what's going on, you can figure it out. So they always say cut against the grain, right? You want to go opposite. So you can see the lines very clearly here. You don't want to cut with it. You want to cut against it. So that way when you're biting it with your teeth, you're actually cutting smaller pieces. You see that? So essentially, if you took a strand, you can see which direction you're actually trying to cut, and you can see how this goes all the way right there. See how it goes all the way through? So it goes all the way across. So basically, we're wanting to cut opposite of that direction. No one really ever showed me that, and sometimes it's hard to find those lines, but once you kind of get a few briskets under your belt, you'll start to have an eye for where the lines are. And of course, you may want to turn the brisket. Right now, it's very obvious we want to cut the brisket this way for most of the part, but when you start to get in certain areas, you're going to have to turn the brisket so that way you can cut in that same direction for the remaining part of the brisket. Okay, so here's another shot of the brisket. I just cut the top portion off, or bottom, or whatever you want to call it. Again, I'm sure there's more correct names for these parts of the brisket, but here's the main part. And as you can see, the lines are going the right way, and they're all going kind of the same way. So you're going to get the most portions out of this piece here, and they're all going to look really good. And I encourage you to, when you cut it, make sure the meat is already either room temperature or cold, really. So you probably wonder why a lot of briskets are served cold and not served hot. If anything, they're cut cold and then reheated to get you back to eating temperature. Mostly because that's what we like to eat. We like to eat warm or hot meat because that kind of lets us know it's done. But in brisket world, it's a little different. We can eat this as a cold meat because it's already fully done. It's kind of like eating turkey and ham out of the fridge, in a sandwich. So same thing here, but again, you can see the lines very clearly. We're going to cut, against opposite. So we're going to be making these cuts here all the way across, and then this one here, we'll have to flip it over, or at least have a better understanding of where the lines are here, so that when we cut it, it's a little bit better. But again, this is the part we're probably going to chop up, make some chopped beef sandwiches. But this is the part you slice. And you're going to get the most, the more brisket looking pieces out of it. Okay. All right. Okay. The good, bad, and the ugly. So here we are. As you can see, I've cut up the brisket, and now you really start to see the pieces. Once you start to really get in there and What I also do when I'm doing this, because this is really the good, bad, and the ugly, right? This is the ugly part. Nobody wants to see this. When you're pulling the brisket apart, I kind of scrape off the fat and I kind of roll. So that's why this is looking a little rough. But here's what comes out. And again, I have piles of this that I've already thrown away, but I just left aside so that you know that this is really not what I want to feed my family right here. It tastes great because it's fat and it's got a lot of juices and it has good flavor. But really, do you want your family eating that? I don't. So, I mean, there's still fat in here, lots of great flavor. There's still, it's all embedded in there. You don't want to get the meat, but or throw away the meat. But definitely, I mean, this is just fat. There's nothing good about eating this. Even if it tastes good. I mean, if you want more brisket flavor, make another brisket. So, anyways, as you can see, we've got all these pieces here. There's another piece. So everything's all cut up. I can easily block these pieces off, foil them up, give them away just like this. And there's, some crispier parts. But bottom line is they're all ready to cut. They're all ready to go. We can cut against the grain right here. All these we can cut against the grain. Here we can cut against the grain. So they're all blocked off already. So that way you can give them away, foil them up, freeze them in these portions. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Okay, here we are, the finished product, and as you can see that we've had a chance to chill it, get it nice and a solid form, and it's really easy to cut when it's nice and cold. Then you can reheat it, so we've already reheated it, and as you can see now, you can see the definition here. You can see the smoke ring, nice and vivid, and you can see the bark, and each of these pieces is excellent. So there you go, there's the finished product that you can feed to your family.